Hello and welcome to Unboxed, the podcast that dives deep into the world of custom packaging and innovative brand experiences. In each episode, we'll be exploring the latest trends, innovations, and best practices in the design and packing industry, and then taking a look at how they can help businesses like yours to create memorable and impactful brand experiences. I'm your host, Sam Johnston. Let's get started. So welcome to Unboxed, the show that dives deep into the world of custom packaging and innovative brand experiences. In each of these episodes, we'll be exploring the latest trends, innovations, best practices in design, packaging, and overall the marketing industry, and how they can be helping businesses like yourselves to create memorable and impactful brand experiences. As always, I'm your host, Sam Johnston, and in this episode, we'll be talking to David Paleschuck, who has over 20 years of global brand building and consumer marketing experience, serves lots of brands like American Express, MasterCard, PepsiCo, Microsoft. The list goes on. Over 10 years in the legal cannabis industry. On top of that, VP licensing and brand partnerships at Dope Magazine, Chief Brand Officer at the Evergreen Herbal and the Matters Group, and most currently, founder and CEO of Branding Bud Consulting Group, and author of the best-selling book, Branding Bud. So David, so awesome to have you on the show. Thanks so much for giving your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me.
We're excited. And for this show in particular, we slightly tweaked the questions because we have such a deep vertical insight and knowledge base here that we want to tap into. So for you, the listener, if you're used to getting certain set questions, these are going to be very similarly themed, but with a slight deeper look here into specifically the cannabis field, just because we've got such rich insights here. The first question is going to be around what inspired our guest to get into the industry. How did they get to start in the field? The next one will be more around that. How does custom cannabis packaging contribute to creating those unique brand experiences that we all know and love? And what are some of the most effective strategies that our guest today has been seeing for those? The third one is, can they share any success stories or case studies of cannabis businesses in particular that transform their brand through custom packaging and design? The fourth one, what are some of the biggest challenges or roadblocks that businesses and listeners out there face when it comes to these packaging challenges, and how might they be able to overcome those? And the last one, we'll take our crystal ball and take a little look at the future of what custom packaging might look like in the next 5 to 10 years, and what could businesses and listeners be doing today to stay ahead of that curve. So we're going to run all the way back to the beginning of those questions here, David. What inspired you to get into the cannabis industry, and how did you get your start in the field?
Well, I'll go back. It was 2012, and the I-502 law passed in Washington State, which was the adult use cannabis law. And I saw so many of my friends leaving Microsoft, where I was working, as well as Starbucks and Amazon and Boeing getting into the industry. And over time, I just saw that there was an opportunity for me to help them. I had understood from working in the credit card industry at American Express and MasterCard for many years, what the difference between transacting and shopping. And I knew that in cannabis dispensaries, there was a lot of shopping, but there was also a lot of transacting. And to be clear, transacting is when somebody knows what they want and they want to be on their way. For example, their gas or their coffee. Shopping is a different experience, which is you really want to learn about products that are there. You want to learn about more. So I understood from my credit card days that there's a difference between shopping and transacting. And prior to getting into the corporate world, I had owned an art gallery. So for 10 years in New York City, I was building experiences on a monthly basis and having people enter my gallery and creating these experiences. So I knew that I had an opportunity and I had experience that I could sort of tweak and leverage into the industry, which was building out dispensaries and understanding how people shop and consume. And then on top of that, what is that experience and how do people feel when they come into the store to purchase, in this case, cannabis? So with that, I was able to jump in right away and sort of understand what products were available, what form factors they came in, and how people shopped for them.
Fantastic. And what a culture change. Maybe it wasn't, but my perception is going from curation of gallery spaces into the corporate world. That's quite a jump and a leap. What was that experience like, kind of jolting from one to the other?
Well, that was called having a successful art gallery in New York City for 9 years, and then the economy falling out and nobody buying art or art furniture.
Yeah.
So my pivot there was to go back to school for my MBA. And when I came out of school, when I graduated, I just had multiple offers. I had done an intern at American Express, etc. And
Mhm.
basically with hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars of student loans.
Yep.
It didn't take a minute before I understood I had to go into the corporate world to pay off my MBA.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are going to be feeling the same way on that, even today as they're coming into those experiences. And have you found that that prior experience from the more creative side of sort of industry life going into that corporate world, is there any key benefit that you found that you had that maybe other people didn't have when they didn't have that background?
Absolutely. And so when I start off in conversations as I consult, I will often say, are we having a creative brainstorm session or are we having an analytical dialogue, right? And so I can work both sides of my brain, but I think it's important always to start off knowing who you're working with and how they think and how they approach things. If they're creative, that's great. If
Hmm.
they're all business, that's great too. You just need to know how they think and how to manage that and get the best out of that thinking.
That's fantastic. Well, let's dig here into some of this sort of the more recent cannabis packaging questions here. The next one is how does custom packaging contribute to creating unique brand experiences? And what are some of the most effective strategies that you've seen for achieving this?
Well, okay, that's a big question. And I'll start off by saying, I know we have limited time, but I'll start off by saying, um, I'm now in the cannabis industry. Cannabis comes in many forms. So just by talking about form factor up front is really important relative to this. And I will and even though it's cannabis specific, it really relates to everybody in packaging and consumer product goods.
Hmm.
Uh, so first and foremost, cannabis comes in multiple form factors. That can be anything from flower, which is typically what people know, which you smoke. But then there's all sorts of, I'll start off. There's inhalation, there's ingestion, and then there's topical use, which means one you inhale, one you eat, and one you put on your skin. So knowing that there's three ways of uptake of cannabis and cannabinoids, we now understand that there are different form factors. So the different form factors, again, and I won't go through all of them because there's too many, but range anywhere from flower all the way through to extracts and tinctures, to beverages, to edibles, to sublingual slips that you put under your tongue almost like a breath strip,
Hmm.
uh, to transdermal patches, almost like a Nicorette type of Band-Aid that you would put on. So it's amazing, and vape pens and so on and so forth. So when you think about this wide array and spectrum of form factors that cannabis comes in, now you can start to think about, wow, packaging is just off the charts. For example, if you have flour, that will come. It typically comes either in a glass jar or a Mylar bag, depending on the brand and if it's a luxury brand or a value brand and what shelf it sits on, so to speak.
Yep.
But all the way at the other end, if you have a transdermal patch infused with cannabis, it's basically like a Band-Aid. So you're already taking cues from consumer product goods, like if it looks like a Band-Aid and it works like a Band-Aid, chances are you're going to package it like a Band-Aid, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to reinvent the wheel. So there are many cues that we take from everyday life and CPG products into the cannabis industry. But then also there's little twists and turns in terms of, depending on the form factor, that relates to the dosing and that relates to the uptake. So, for example, if you smoke cannabis, you'll feel it almost immediately. If you eat an edible, let's say a brownie, you won't feel it for 30 or 45 minutes. And that even depends on how big you are, how much you weigh, what your metabolism is, what you just ate prior to eating the edible, right? There's
Yeah.
so many other things involved. So there's a lot of information to get on the packaging. There's a lot of different types of packaging depending on the form factor. And then just another layer on top of this is often cannabis is exactly the same from package to package, but is marketed very differently. So I always talk about this in an additive or subtractive perspective. So additive means cannabis or this product will enhance what you're doing. Let's say I'm about to play music or take a hike or paint a painting. That's additive or subtractive. I really want to get to sleep, or I need something to alleviate my pain. That's subtractive. So, and it could still be exactly the same product, just in different packages marketed differently. So it's really intriguing in terms of how important packaging is to cannabis and how it directs the consumer, maybe even more so than just in the real world.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's so much complexity and there's so much moving continuously in the cannabis market in general, as far as regulation goes and new adoption and new products that seem to be coming to market all of the time. There's a lot of moving parts. And for our listeners, there's some people that have got brands out in the market currently. They're looking for interesting new ways, maybe some hints and tips on how they can be improving their go-to-market, their packaging, and get their story across. And then some people that are at the beginning, early concept stage. They have an amazing idea. Maybe they formalized it. Maybe they've got a little bit of testing product available. Now they're trying to figure out how do I get this thing out there. So, do you have any maybe success stories or people out there doing some amazing things, in particular in the cannabis space, maybe where they've transformed their brand with custom packaging or they've just done an amazing job of it?
Yeah, there's two brands in particular that I think are doing an amazing job. So, if you speak to people in the cannabis industry, you'll say, I'll often ask them, who are your clients? Who do you sell to? And more often than not, depending who they are, the less savvy business people will say, cannabis sells itself. We sell it to everybody. The more savvy business people will say, we have a target audience and a target market. Um, the brands that I have, and let me pause for a moment. Typically, and in the first book I wrote, Branding about the Commercialization of Cannabis, I talk about four brand archetypes. And those brand archetypes are not mutually exclusive. They will change over time because society changes over time. But at its most simple, there are celebrity brands, there are charity brands, there are gender brands, there are foodie brands, there are nostalgic brands. Um, there are counterculture brands. There are all these different types of brands, and often they're overlaid. But at the end of the day, where I've seen the most successful cannabis brands get traction are they're not only selling cannabis, but they're also selling a particular lifestyle that goes along with it. And so I'll give you two examples. There's a brand on the East Coast called Fish Whistle. Fish Whistle, and I didn't know this until I met the brand owner. Fish whistle is a nickname for a joint or a pre-roll that anglers use the word. So anglers are fisher, I want to say fishermen, but fisher people. I think anglers is the correct word. The bottom line is that when you are an angler and you are out fishing and you say to your friend, "Hey, do you have a fish whistle?" or "It's fish whistle time," they understand what they're talking about. So there's a sense of community, there's a sense of insiderism, there's a sense of meeting the consumer where they are and when they consume
Yeah.
cannabis at a certain place and time. And so that's really special rather than just like, hey, we're a cannabis company or you know, we're Dadgrass, we're a nostalgia brand. It's like it's cute, it's funny, but it doesn't really take you to the place and time where they consume, how they consume it in their way of consuming it. Another brand, which I think is great, is called Heavy Grass. And Heavy Grass, their whole focus is heavy metal. It's music, but in particular, heavy metal. So they know who their customers are. They know what their customers like. They know the look and feel of what they like. They know what concerts they go to. If they wanted to sell merch at a concert or tag onto a tour, they know where and when to be at those activities that relate to heavy metal and cannabis, and their brand is Heavy Grass. So
That's
again,
great.
it's really knowing where your consumers are, how they think, really getting into their mindset and building a brand for them. That's how I think you make a strong brand.
I think that's fantastic. Yeah, and understanding what part of the market you want to be in, understanding what your kind of vision, mission, all that good stuff. Like, what is your identity and DNA that you want to get out there, in order to know who that initial tribe is of early adopters or who you're going to represent. You have to know that about yourself first. And a lot of the guests that we have come on the show bring really interesting, different perspectives on that. Maybe they come from totally different tribes out there in the market that the consumer is reflecting themselves in the buying cycle. So, cannabis in particular it's exactly the same. There's a complete mirror of the same things that we see across society in general, right? It's a whole industry of itself that has every facet of society being reflected back into it. So kind of unlimited. And I'm sure that for everybody listening, there's a niche that is underserved that you could probably still go after for any of those individual use cases of cannabis. Um, getting
Absolutely.
to getting to
And
kind of the sorry, go on, David.
I'm sorry. And just quickly at the super high level, like at the meta level, coming from the credit card industry for years and then working at Microsoft at Xbox and Mountain Dew, which was lifestyle, right? I came to this point and I was like, okay, my career has been 10 plus years in credit card marketing. What's that about? Well, I boiled it down to trust marketing. It's about trust. It's about, hey, you can trust us with your, well, one, American Express, don't leave home without it, right? So you could trust us with your data. You could trust us that every time you swipe the card, it's going to work. You could trust us with your finances, all of that. So that's trust. Then when I got to lifestyle at Xbox and Mountain Dew, again, it was like, wow, this is all about the cool factor. When you take cannabis and find that sweet spot, cannabis comes right in between trust marketing and lifestyle marketing. And what it really is we know you're going to consume this product, whether you're going to smoke it or inhale it or ingest it, or put it on your skin. You need to trust us and our processes and our methods and our ingredients. And on the other side, there's this cool factor, the lifestyle factor. And you need to blend those two things. And I think today, in whatever industry you're in, trust and lifestyle are the two pillars that are most important because if you can get somebody to trust your brand and you can get them to understand that you understand them and their lifestyle and you can support them in that, that's key. So trust and lifestyle, and to me that's what really permeates through CPG and the world we live in today, and it all starts off with the packages that we see on the shelf, right?
That's it. That's the entire podcast done right there. If you're listening, that's the best. That's a fantastic takeaway. I'd be taking down notes if I was listening to this and kickstarting a brand at the moment. And on the flip side of that, what are some of the challenges, or maybe some of the roadblocks, like the negative side of this? You've worked in a number of larger brands. You're advising and working with a substantial amount of smaller brands as well. What are some of those big challenges or roadblocks that businesses face when it comes to packaging? How might they be able to overcome them ahead of schedule?
Well, I think the key issue is if you have a brand story, you need to stick with it and you need to follow it through on every single level. So, for example, I had a client in the cannabis industry. They were all about um, really the environment and sustainability. They built their grow a certain way so it was aeroponic. It pulled moisture from the air. It recycled that. There were so many wonderful things about this grow, this cultivation facility that was so different from so many others. And in the end, they overinvested in that. So by the time they actually built their facility, created their product, which was cultivating cannabis, and started to package it, their funds ran low. So what did they do? They looked for the cheapest packaging, and they ended up putting this product, flower, into Mylar bags. Mylar bags are not sustainable, but here their whole story is absolutely all about how much money we spent in our facility, how we built the sustainable product and brand, and they came to market in a 13-cent Mylar bag. The truth is, at least in the cannabis industry, they should have come to market in a glass container with a bamboo top. Both recyclable, both talk to sustainability, both really carry their story out right to the end user. But those people that were so interested in that and were willing to pay a premium price for that just lost it when they saw that it was in a Mylar plastic bag. It wasn't true to the brand story. It wasn't true to the North Star, and therefore they're no longer a brand. I'm sorry to say. They had great product, but they just really diverted from their story and their North Star, and their mission. So those
Yeah.
those are things that I've seen where people, and actually I'll give you one other quick story. So having been a former pro skater and a brand manager at Mountain Dew for years, 100 years ago, I was in Spain, in Barcelona a few years ago, right before the pandemic. and I was walking down the street and I was just stopped dead in my tracks. I looked at a billboard. There was a billboard. It was a Mountain Dew billboard. And there were a couple of kids carrying skateboards. And one of the skateboards, which was really in the foreground, had its trucks, and the trucks are what mounts the wheels to the deck. They were on backwards. Now, only a skater would know that and see that, but that's who they're appealing to. So here they probably hired some big agency in Spain. They did a photo shoot. They put up these billboards, and no one ever realized that the trucks were on backwards on the skateboard. Now, to me, as someone that they would be trying to appeal to as a skater, they just lost me because I just see, right through what's happening here. It's those little details, it's those little things that can really lose somebody if they're really into your brand and follow your brand in a way that makes sense and is meaningful. So
Yeah.
I urge everybody to
Mm.
think about those little details and focus on them and focus on how they fit into your overall brand and brand story. Um, because everybody's looking at those things and everybody's looking for the crack in the story.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the world we live in and the lack of trust relative to brands and promises.
And there's so much sort of active conversation around generative AI and all the conversation around that. Trust is becoming a real key focus of society's conversation again, and what is real and what is human and what is a real kind of interaction that's meaningful. And mirroring your story of the skateboarding, yeah, I'm a British Army veteran myself, and within kind of the community of people that are actively serving all veterans, you see through things immediately on TVs, movies, shows, advertisements, products. When they've hired an agency, they know nothing about the equipment or what they're doing, and they play it out, and you lose everybody in the first couple of seconds because something obvious is incorrect. But in any industry, it starts with most founders start off from a place of this gap in the market, this experience that isn't happening that they believe that they can offer. And then they go away and get really excited about the product and forget about that end experience again. Like, what if it doesn't matter how good the product is, it doesn't matter all the story behind it. If that experience the customer eventually receives, whether it's through the initial marketing materials, whether it's through the product in their hands in their home, doesn't match with that expectation, it falls over really, really quickly. So I think a real good learning lesson here is just to wherever you started, hopefully it was with that customer experience. We want to make this happen. How do we bring that to market? Make sure that you're going back to that all the time and completing the cycle, making sure that that authenticity and trust is there. Um, and we've only got a couple of minutes left here, but maybe we could take a little look at the future here. There's a lot of things happening faster than maybe they were previously in different markets. In particular, within the cannabis market, what do you see as the future of packaging, and how is that going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, this is what I hope. I mean, right now there's 35 states, where cannabis is legal. But those 35 states have different rules and regulations. So each package for the same product is different because cannabis can't cross state lines. So it's grown or processed within a state, and then the packaging is different. I have a friend who's actually French, and he works in the cannabis industry here in the US. And he laughs at it all the time because everybody in the cannabis industry complains that it's so fragmented and everything's different. And he says, I'm from Europe and we've lived that way all our lives. You put a product out in France, you put it out in Germany, you put it out in Italy, etc. So I'm hoping the future will bring less fragmented rules and regulations and compliance gaps where we can actually start to use similar packaging across state lines. Because what that will do is really help us with the branding. Because with each state having its own rules and regulations, it means our packaging is different from state to state to state. So we have to look for those key components, right, of packaging, whatever they are. They could be color, it could be shape, it could be material, it could be all these different things that we look for the similarities that we could thread through from state to state to state. So, just in terms of, I called out earlier the 14 cannabis brand archetypes. I think, or not I think, I'm sure that as time goes on, what's important to society will start to bubble up And we see those things. Like, for example, sustainability brought about soy inks and craft paper, or recycled paper for packaging. So we see these things that start to happen, and we see these things that start to come up because they become important in society. So I foresee, sustainability and recyclability as being really important and only getting more important. I think the cost is really an issue, and that always comes into play. I think at the bottom line, packaging versus product, or rather the cost of packaging versus the cost of the product, is sort of the key that people need to work through. I see it. I see it from colognes and perfumes all the way through to the cannabis industry. The more cannabis you purchase, the more margin there is for a nice box to go around it. If you're purchasing a small amount of cannabis, there's no margin to package it up. So, there's that spread too. But I think overall, packaging will change over time as things become more important to society. Those things will be reflected in the packages and the materials those packages are used from. That's what I think we'll see in the future. And then smart packages. We already see QR codes. We already see other, barcodes and all of those things. I think we'll start to see some more interactivity in the packaging, as we should. So there's a lot. There's a lot.
That's
But
exciting.
I think those two little nuggets are good enough for right now.
Yeah, definitely. And that's amazing insights for anyone listening. If those are things that you're not thinking about, that you're not planning for, definitely worth taking a look at those. Those things that are likely going to be coming down the pipeline. And you as the listener or the business owner could also be doing your part to make those things come to fruition. So we've had some really, really insightful bits of knowledge here, David. So thank you so much for giving us all of this and giving your time. What's the best way for people to follow with you outside of course, going and buying the book and getting in touch that way? We'll make sure there's a link in the show notes. But what's the best way for someone to follow you and to get any updates that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn, so I could certainly be reached there.
Yeah.
My website is brandingbud.com, and anybody could reach out and reach me at david@brandingbud.com.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we put those in the show notes. They're clickable as well. So if you're listening, just go down there, click to expand, and then you'll be able to click on those. And that's it. That's our time for today for this episode of Unboxed. Thank you so much to our guest here, David, for giving this time and expertise. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a review wherever you're listening to this. It means a lot to us and all the algorithm robot overlords that control things. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, want to be a guest on a future episode, you can reach us at hello@merchantboxes.com. And that's it for today. Thank you so much. Thanks, David. Bye.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. It was sponsored by Merchant Boxes. Merchant Boxes provide custom packaging to large businesses and small creators that customers love. If you are looking for award-winning custom package designs that make your business and products stand out from the competition, click the link in the show notes to find out more.